I'd like you to raise your hand if you're under the age of 16. Thank you. I wanted to make sure I knew where you were sitting so I can make sure to address my comments also to my Talmidim and Talmidot. I'd like to preface my remarks this morning with a nigun that my father loved. That might not usually happen at a siyyum, but it seems appropriate to do so, as one thing many of you know is that my dad loved to sing. So join me in this one, which he often used for Shir Hamalot on Shabbat. We'll just do the melody. La 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 month of learning to my father, Moshe Eliezer ben Feigan Achama v'David Eliyahu. Though he has heard me daven and lane, I think this will be the first time he's hearing me do this. Hopefully not the last. At a siyyum, as you know, you celebrate finishing a chunk of study. So today, I will share what I've learned in addition to some memories and legacies of my father. I will also use a few props and ask some questions. Afterwards, I will recite a special prayer said after a siyyum of learning, called the Hadran. This is only done in a minyan, and you have a part in it too, so answer Amen. The name of the text I studied with Glenn is Derekh Eretz Zuta, or according to the Sansino edition, Short Tractate on Correct Behavior. It often describes the behavior of scholars, and parts of it truly describe my father, as you will see. I kept finding myself saying, he was just like that, he did that, this is him. But truly it describes the midot for which we all strive. It is arranged in the style of Pirkei Avot with short sayings, not always clearly connected. They might be organized by a starting word or number groups to help remember them better. Here are some examples from different prakim of Derekh Eretz Zuta that stood out for me. I'll be passing out a text. It's double-sided. I want to apologize for two things. One is it does not have nikudot, and two is the Hebrew is a little unusual, so I'll do my best to get the pronunciation correct. I'll do my best. You should have enough to share with your neighbors. The first text reads as follows. Kevei kenod bakua שנתפתח להכניס הרוח וכערוגה עמוקה שמחזקת את מימיה וכקנקנה זפותה שמשמרת את יינה כספוג שהוא סופג את הכל. One should always be like an air bag, which is open to receive the air, and as a deep excavation which preserves the water contained in it, and as a glazed jug or a bottle that preserves the wine in it, and as a sponge that absorbs everything. What do these things have in common? They all can hold something. They're all open. They gather knowledge. Maybe not a sponge, but it gathers something. My father's knowledge never soured. The jug passively collects, as does the deep excavation and the airbag. But like the sphog, which absorbs things from the outside, he was a very active learner. Let me tell you more about this. He studied at public school as a child, then at Orthodox Day School and high school, and then at this school. And this is actually his, and he gave it to me a long time ago at Yeshiva University, and then at the Jewish Theological Seminary. From each of them, he absorbed what they had to offer and studied with many great men. He was proud that his children studied in all kinds of schools as well, and encouraged and supported us to further our study in Israel. He did not get to do this when he was finished with high school, so it was especially meaningful to him to send us there. He also loved music, biology, and history, and he could name composers and names of pieces he heard on the radio with ease. He watched and loved the show Jeopardy and always answered the questions before the contestant. But by far, his favorite subjects were Tanakh and Talmud, telling their stories with tears in his eyes and using quotes all the time. Tanakh quotes especially peppered his speech, sometimes in very funny ways. I am one of 5 children, and when he was upset with us, he'd say, Shimuna Hamorim. Listen, you rebels. Or Banim Gidalti Viromanti Vehem Pashubi. I have raised up children and they've sinned against me. Or Derekh Eretz Zuta, which actually describes something geographical, but could also be understood to mean have some common sense and appropriate behavior, you Philistines. I could ask him almost anything, and he'd know the chapter and verse where it was located. The second text, number 2, goes on to say, Heye ke'askufa hatachtona shehakol dashim ba uchiyeted nemucha shehakol tolin ba. This text goes on to say, be like a nail in the wall that is within the reach of everyone to hang his clothing on. What do you think that might mean? Be helpful. Okay. Any other thoughts? Accessible. That's what I thought too. I understood this as making your Torah accessible to all. A favorite memory of mine that illustrates this is that on Friday nights, when I was a child, before a Chag, my dad would do something special at shul. Before Tefillah ended, he would give a little talk about the upcoming holiday in the form of questions and answers. He'd circulate around the sanctuary, and almost like a game show host, but for every right answer that people in the kahal gave, he'd throw them a chocolate kiss, or a Hanukkah gelt piece, or a dreidel, if it was near Hanukkah. It was great fun, and even though his own children knew many of the answers, he would always encourage us to participate as well. It was a fun way to get people involved, round out their knowledge, and make it a sweet experience. Here's a bit from the second perek that reminds me of my dad. This is text number 3. Kol drachecha yihiyu l'shem shamayim, heve ohevet hashamayim v'yarei min hashamayim, heve chared v'sas al kol hamitzvot. Let all your ways be for the sake of heaven. Love heaven and be in awe of it. Tremble at it and at the same time rejoice over all the commandments. My dad was a l'shem shamayim kind of guy. He just lived that way. He lived rightly and lived to serve and to lead with love, as he liked to say. He was in awe of heaven even in a literal way. 2 stories. My carpool home from high school in the early evening from Los Angeles back to North Hollywood was always fun, as my girlfriends and I would chat, laugh, and sing. Sometimes, though, it was just my dad and me. And as the sun would set and the sky would be swirling with colors, he would say, Golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or. as we watch the evening truly rolling in. Another about rejoicing over the mitzvot. Among the many hespedim offered at my father's funeral, Rabbi Richard Spiegel of Temple Eitz Chaim in Thousand Oaks, where my dad attended for the last 12 years once he retired, said that my dad's holiday was Simchat Torah. In fact, his midah was Simcha. He rejoiced and delighted in the Chagim and in the mitzvot. He loved them. They were done with gusto. Here are some examples. Pesach at my sister's is a big family event. My dad relished preparing the charoset and frequently was tasting it and teaching us about quality control as he continued to add more wine. It needs a bit more. Could use a little more, maybe a drop more. It was always a joyous experience for all of us. My father often taught about tefillin to young people, calling it being all dressed up in God, or God's jewelry. He loved giving tzedakah. He loved bringing a big teaching to the Seder, in addition to always having something new to say every single year, every single time. He valued so strongly the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim that he did on a very regular basis as a pulpit rabbi. He was involved in Gittin at the University of Judaism. He was an ambassador of Judaism to my mother's public school classes and to neighboring churches. He taught on radio shows. He was Magdil Torah Umadir at every opportunity. He supported Jewish youth groups and programs for young people in Los Angeles. There was one. He taught at Camp Masad, then Camp Ramah over a number of summers. He sent us there, as well as to Moshava and Camp NCSY. Here's another little piece from text 4. Kabel alecha divrei Torah b'tza'ar. What do you think this might mean?
Translate.
B'tza'ar. Kabel alecha divrei Torah b'tza'ar.
Translate.
David.
I have a question. What does this mean and what does this mean?
Top of the page.
Like it's gray and
Oh, that's because, it's a very good question. That's because there are different versions of this masekhet. And so on the computer website where I got it, the person that put together the website highlighted the differences in color. On your copy, it came out in gray. So I'm going to return to text 4. The translation that I found said, accept and receive the words of law even when you are in affliction. Even in his illness, my dad exemplified this. When he was first diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he turned to my mother at the doctor's office and said, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yisa'u. Speak to the children of Israel that they should go forward. When he realized he was headed down a difficult road of treatment, he said, Adonai leave lo ira. God is with me, and I will not fear. When he was in a lot of pain, though he was still going out walking a bit, a few times, he would quote Marabu Ma'asecha and wonder aloud, look at this great world that God created. Look at its glory. Would it diminish one iota of the Ribono Shel Olam's greatness if he took away pain from the world? He did ask this question. Yet, after this walk and after other times where he expressed this, he'd get ready for bed, he'd kiss the mezuzah nightly and say, Shaddai yishmereni v'yatzileni mikol ra. ask for his kippah each time he could sit up in bed. He'd say, "Thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the things that his body could still do." I'm going to look now at text number 5, very short paraphrase there. Cheshbon Yafeh. That particular piece of the Mishnah has a lot to do with keeping your accounts appropriately, and my dad was really great at that. Let your accounts always be correct. I grew up with something called a cheshbon. It was before cell phones, so my dad began to keep track of my middle school and high school years of calling friends immediately when I got home from school and using the phone for very long periods of time. I was responsible for this cheshbon and was fully expected to repay him my part of the family phone bill. I did repay it with lots of babysitting money. Now a piece from Perek Gimel, it's text number 6. Kaneh Shem Tov, Kaneh La'atzmo. Kana Shem Tov, Kana La'atzmo. Kana lo Divrei Torah, Kana lo Chayei Ha'olam Haba. This one gave me some pause. What is this part about? If one has acquired for himself a good name, he has acquired it for himself. But if one has acquired for himself words of Torah, he has acquired for himself the life of the world to come. So a good name is one thing, but what can you do with words of Torah that you can't do just with a good name?
You can teach others.
You can teach others. You can share it. Above all, my father was a teacher. He taught in the United States Air Force. He had a real uniform. I just got this. He taught in the United States Air Force as a chaplain. He taught children, adults, converts, non-Jews. When he retired, he asked to teach Parshat HaShavua at his new shul, not for a fee, but because he loved to do it. He took any and every opportunity to teach in his home, in hospitals, at weddings, at family gatherings. He breathed it. On Fridays when we spoke before Shabbat by phone, he always shared a word, a Torah thought, a teaching he gave. He sent us articles by mail about Torah. He was in love with it. I could hear it in his voice. On car rides, we'd argue over Sefer Iyov. At a restaurant, we'd debate about Tanor Achnai. I'd ask him to explain parts of Sefer Yechezkel. He'd teach me about President Lincoln's Torah, or explain the apologetics and politics of Talmud, the connections with the New Testament, aspects of science. What didn't my father know? He had a comment, something interesting to add about countries he'd read about, places he'd been. He was at home in philosophy. He led a foreign policy group in his retirement community. He taught living room learning and lunch and learn for years and years and years. My next text describes it best. Text number 7. 15 midot ne'amru b'talmid chacham ve'elu hen. Na'eh b'viato, chasid b'yeshivato, chacham b'da'at, arum b'yir'ah, pikeach b'drachav, chacham b'drachav, kones b'zochran, marbel hashiv, shoel ki'inyan u'meshiv kahalacha, ומשיב על כל פרק ופרק דבר, הולך אצל חכם ולומד על מנת ללמד ועל מנת לעשות. The following 15 customs are ascribed to a scholar. He is pleasant in entering and so also when leaving, prudent in his fear for heaven, versed in wisdom, wise in his ways, has a good conception of things, a retentive memory, is clear in his answers, questions to the point, and answers according to the law. He learns something new from every chapter taught to him. He's going to the wise. He learns for the purpose of teaching it and performing it. A word about pleasantness in entering and also on leaving. On our weekly walks to shul as a child on Shabbat, My father greeted every single person we met, even if they were just raking leaves or passing us. He said, "How do you do?" and smiled every time. He finished every phone call with politeness and pleasantness. I could hear that in his voice. Chapter 4 makes references to tzedakah, and my dad spoke about this mitzvah and did it often. He gave money to many kinds of organizations, both here and in Israel. He supported a number of environmental organizations, and he got tithes from them. If someone in shul commented on the tithe favorably, he took it off and gave it to them. My sister and I found piles of solicitation envelopes as he sat down to give tzedakah very regularly. He gave us tzedakah boxes even as adults. Text number 8. Ba'od shehu biyadcha kaneh mimenu ha'olam hazeh. Translation, give it to those who need it in this world. A distinct memory I have of profound tzedakah was in the year 1975, I think. I was a teen, and my family adopted a number of boat people seeking asylum from Vietnam. A number of synagogues and churches in the area were doing this in Southern California and perhaps in other parts of the country as well. A girl and 2 boys lived with us, and we gave them shelter, clothing, and food. They had no English. Our shul set them up with local jobs, medical care, even an apartment. It made for a busy household, surely, but what an impression it made on me. I also remember them telling me about feeding striking workers outside a big food market, making sure each one had a kosher hot dog. Text number 9. Im asiti dvarai b'simcha, hamalya sheli teitze lishcharcha, ve'af ani ba'atzmi eitze likratcha ve'omer lecha bo'acha b'shalom. If you have performed all my commandments with joy, my attendants will come to meet you, and even I myself will say to you, let thy coming be in peace. I like to think that the Ribono Shel Olam recognized this simcha in my dad and welcomed him in this way. I'd like to jump now to chapter number 7 in the masekhet, which is text number 10 on the reverse. איזה הוא מכובד, מאכיל ומשקה, מלביש ומנעיל, מחניץ ומוציא אחד הרב ואחד החכם. ואיזה הוא המבזה, לא ישב ולא ידבר, לא ישב ולא ידבר במקומו, ולא סותר את דבריו. Who respects the sages? He who gives food, drink, dress, shoes, goes out to meet and accompanies when leaving without distinction between rabbi or listener. My dad filled in for other rabbis so easily and with great pleasure. He did this here in Berkeley and in Cleveland at my brother-in-law's shul with regularity. For Yamim Noraim, he'd happily daven, even give a sermon if asked. He loved it and did it with joy and no preparation necessary. He would say things like, sure, I'll daven Musaf, and I'll throw in a Haftorah, too. This past Pesach, he gave my brother-in-law Steve the honor of leading the Seder, claiming he was too tired since he had just finally finished all his chemo and radiation therapy. But then he began to lead it, continuing all the way to Shulchan Orech so beautifully. It was like breathing for him. He honored his students and guests, knew how to include them in the discussion, and would often say, "You're right, except for one thing." Then he'd add another tidbit. A piece from chapter 9 of Zuta describes my father as well. Text number 11. Heve ohevet beit hakneset kedei shetitol tzarcha b'chol yom. Heve ohevet beit hamidrash kedei sheyavo'u banecha letalmud Torah. ואוהב את העניים כדי שלא יבואו בניך לידי אותה מידה. Love the prayer house in order that you shall be rewarded daily, and the house of learning in order that your children shall come to study. Love the poor in order that your children shall not come to poverty. Until he became too ill, my dad went to a daily Chabad minyan right outside Leisure Village in Camarillo, where they lived, where my mom still lives. This was his daily chedra, and it's where he read the Torah each Rosh Chodesh, where he recited Tehillim for the IDF. He always loved shul, though it was also his job. On Shabbat afternoon, though, it was clear what the procedure was. After lunch, Zmirot and benching, in that order, he would announce, "I am taking a nap. I am not to be disturbed unless there is a direct strike by the enemy." He had other military terms like front and center if it was very serious, and fire away if you had a lot of questions. Speaking of his life in the Air Force, the community that living on an Air Force base provided in Mississippi, the opportunity, he loved the community that living on a base provided in Mississippi. The opportunity to meet the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. there, to get to know the Turkish Islamic community while stationed overseas, even attending a circumcision ceremony and learning Turkish. His monthly visits to complete his reserve duties in the United States, in different parts of California. My father achieved the rank of lieutenant colonel, for which he was very proud, serving the needs of Air Force personnel of all faiths in Turkey, Greece, Crete, Mississippi, and California. He taught, obtained ritual items for anyone who needed them, conducted services, took classes to keep learning, and made many friends from other faith communities. He was even buried with full military honors. Remember what I said about my dad greeting each and every person in such a friendly way? I noticed this even as a young girl, and it amazed me back then, too. In fact, I made him a button to wear that said, "Rabbis are a friendly sort." Because he once said to me, "I'm a friendly sort." He told me of Rav Chaim of Volozhin, who argued that animals who help people should be allowed into Olam Haba. He even told the dogs to settle down and be peaceful as he and my brother walked past them on Shabbat, quoting the pasuk from Shmot Yud Aleph to them, to the dogs. U'lechol b'nei Yisrael lo yecharatz kelev l'shem. So when I hear this next part from the last chapter of Zuta, called Perek HaShalom, I am reminded once again of the importance of this midah, this desire to bring a bit of shalom into each encounter. This is text 13. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Vayiven sham Gidon mizbeach, vayikra lo Adonai Shalom. Ma mizbeach she'eno ochel velo shote velo meriach, velo nivne ela lechaparatan shel Yisrael nikra Shalom. מי שהוא אוהב שלום ורודף שלום ומקדים שלום ומשיב שלום ומטיל שלום בין ישראל לאביהם שבשמיים על אחת כמה וכמה. This is a paraphrase of the text. Rav Chia bar Abba said, Gidon built an altar there and named it Adonai Shalom. If an altar which can't eat or drink can make kapara for the sins of Israel, then how much more so a person who loves and pursues peace, who welcomes people with the greeting of peace and responds with peace. I have 2 more shirts to show you. For those of you who haven't seen this kind of shirt before, it's torn to show that we're torn on the inside too. But now I want you to look at this very last shirt. My father didn't wear this shirt. Someone gave it to him. He was much too humble to walk around wearing it. But this is really what he strove for and what he modeled to his children every single day. It's what so many condolence cards said about him, that combination of Torah knowledge coupled with joy and menschlichkeit, a fine person, a kind person, a good person. It's the message he gave his daughters of what to look for in a partner. Above all, to be a Ba'al Lev Tov, a good person. It's the most important thing you can be, greater than all Torah knowledge. And even though we're torn, it's what we strive for to be both knowledgeable and a mensch, to be the simcha, to give tzedakah, to share what you learn with others. My dad shares his date of passing, 5 Av, with Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, also known as the Ari HaKadosh, who died in the year 1572. Rav Luria is considered one of the most important figures in Jewish mysticism, who revolutionized the study of Kabbalah. Though my father was not a mystic by any means, he would have appreciated this thought by Rabbi Jonathan Omerman. As Esa enai el ha'arim me'ayin yavo ezri. I shall lift up mine eyes unto the mountains, from whence shall come my help. Rabbi Omerman teaches, most English versions of this piece of Tehillim, it's Psalm 121, translate me'ayin as from where. However, it can also be interpreted as from the nothingness or from the fullness of being. This is based on a teaching from the Zohar, which, while my dad might say very nice and argue the pshat, I think that he would very much appreciate the idea that God is fullness and full of life, full of joy, full. There is much more that I can say about my father. No person can be summed up in half an hour or using props or photos, God forbid. And I missed being with all of you during Shiva. So over the course of the next year, do feel welcome to meet with me, and I'll tell you more stories. Meanwhile, make a commitment to share your learning. Give tzedakah. Learn more Torah. Be a mensch. Greet a passerby. I will now recite the end of the masekhet and say the Hadran prayer. And afterwards, please join me in the social hall for a brunch in honor of my dad, Rav Moshe Eliezer ben Fig and Nechama David, and enjoy a brunch in his honor and memory, and have a l'chaim if you're old enough. Amar Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Amar lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu liYisrael, Atem garamtem lahachariv et beiti ulehigalot et banai. Heyu shoalim bishloma va'ani mochel lachem, ma ta'am sha'alu shem Yerushalayim, ve'omer v'darshu et shalom v'darshu et shlom ha'ir, ve'omer yehi shalom b'chaylech, ואומר למען החי ורעי וגומר. ומי שהוא אוהב שלום ורודף שלום ומקדים שלום ומשיב שלום, הקדוש ברוך הוא מורישו לחיי העולם הזה והעולם הבא. שלום רב. ve'anavim yirshu eretz v'hit'angu al rov shalom. The printer reversed the order. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Yisrael, you have caused the destruction of my house and the exile of my children. You ask for its peace and for its well-being, and I forgive you. What is this based on? A number of different texts. Ask for the peace of Jerusalem. Seek the peace of the city. May there be peace in your multitudes. Because of my brothers and friends, and someone who loves peace, pursues peace, seeks out peace, returns and answers in peace, God will cause him to inherit the life in this world and in the world to come. And your humble ones will inherit the life of this world, of the land, and will rejoice in great peace. The Hadran is said at the end of the masekhet, and I want to preface the recitation of it with a kind of a paraphrased translation of it. We shall return to you. We shall return to you, Mishnah. May you return to us. Our thoughts are with you, Mishnah. May your thoughts be with us. We shall not forget you, Mishnah. May you not forget us. Not in this world, nor in the world that will be. Hadran alach v'hadrach alach. Da'atan alach v'da'atach alam. La nitneshe minach v'lo titneshe minan. Lo ve'alma hadein v'la ve'alma da'ate. Arevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Torah b'finu ובפיות עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה כולנו אנחנו וצאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך לשמה. מאויבי תחכמני מצוותיך, כי לעולם היא לי. יהי ליבי תמים בחוקיך למען לא אבוש. לעולם לא אשכח פקודיך כי בם חייתני. ברוך אתה אדוני למדני חוקיך, אמן, 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 סלע ועד. מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, ששמת חלקנו מיושבי בית המדרש ולא מיושבי קרנות, שאנו משכימים והם משכימים, אנו משכימים לדברי תורה והם משכימים לדברים בטלים. אנו עמלים והם עמלים, אנו עמלים ומקבלים שכר והם עמלים ואינם מקבלים שכר. אנו רצים והם רצים, אנו רצים לחיי העולם הבא, והם רצים לבאר שחת שנאמר, ואתה אלוהים תורידם לבאר שחת, אנשי דמים ומרמה לא יחצו ימיהם ואני אבטח לך. יהי רצון לפניך אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים מסכת דרך ארץ זוטה, כך תעזרני להפעיל ספרים אחרים ולסיימם, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות, ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה, וזכות כל התנאים ותלמידי חכמים הנזכרים בששת סדרי המשנה, תעמוד לי ולזרעי, שלא תמוש התורה מפי ומפי זרעי וזרע זרעי עד עולם, וקוים בהתהלכך תנחה אותך ושוכבך תשמור עליך, והקיצות כי תשיחך. כי בי ירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים, ואורך ימים בימינה בשמאלה עושר וכבוד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבנו. ועלמא די הוא עתיד להתחדתה ולהחייאה מתיה ולעשה חייתה ולחיי עלמא ולמבנה קרתא דירושלם ולשכללה החלי בגריבה ולמקר כלחנה נוכרה מין ערה ולעתבה פולחנה דשמיא לאתרי. וימלך קודשא בריחו במלכותי ויקרא ויצמח בקנה ויקרב משיחי וחייכון ומייכון חיי בכל בית ישראל בעגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי על ישראל ועל רבנן ועל תלמידיהן ועל כל תלמידיהן ועל כל מן דעסקין באורייתא די ואתרא הדין ודי בכל אתר ואתר. יהי להון ולכל שלם הרבה חינה וחיסתא ורחמי וחיי יריחי וזוני רביחי ופורקן אמין קודם אבוהון די בשמיא ויאמרו אמן. יהי שלם הרבה אמין שמיא וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. עושה שלום דממיו הוא יעשה ברחמיו שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. חיים.